the UAE is working towards being among the best in the world in entrepreneurship. Now, an Emirati startup incubation program has been launched in Abu Dhabi to help businesses become investment ready. Ramesh Jagannathan is Vice Provost of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at New York University, Abu Dhabi, and Managing Director of startAD. He joins us here in the studio. Many thanks for coming in. Great to see you, Ramesh.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Where do you see the potential of UAE startups and also innovation?
Great question. I think to sort of put it in perspective, the world is changing dramatically right in front of our eyes through the second machine age, the artificial intelligence and the deep learning phenomenon. So to put it in perspective, let's rewind back to the Second World War, the end of it, and the birth of Silicon Valley around the electronics innovation. The middle class, at the time was about 140 million in the US. So now let's fast forward, and right now in the global middle class is around 5.2 billion going forward, out of which 3 billion of them are in the India, China, and Africa corridor, what we call. So, if you look at 140 million and 3 billion, which is almost half the world population, we do the math, right? So there is something significant that is happening that's going to be, attached to the second machine age or the fourth industrial revolution that's happening, here. So to put it in perspective as to what's in it for UAE, the UAE is actually in the corridor of India, China, Africa, so to speak. It's all happening in our backyards. So when you look at it, who are making, the middle class is about catering in terms of products and services to the middle class. Mm-hmm. So who is building these products and services for this large population? Is someone sitting in Silicon Valley going to be able to build that? The obvious answer is no. So it has to be built locally here by people here, right?
But can these entrepreneurs, can these startups create jobs for people here in the UAE?
That's a great question. There's a recent US congressional study that studied this, especially about jobs being created by startups. About less than one third of the jobs in the US market were created by the big companies. The 2/3 are through what we call SMEs, and startups are very much part of that. Actually, they did a little bit more detailed analysis in which they said there are these high potential startups which have been around for over 5 years, which grow at a rapid rate. They actually create most of the jobs in the 2/3 class.
Tell us about the incubation program that's been started in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, so our goal here is to build capacity in the region. So that means creating jobs through local entrepreneurship programs. So Ibtikari, the innovation program, is a Khalifa Fund program. It has been around for about 5 years. So we have been partnering with them and running the last 2 programs. So we had a very successful cohort last year. And the interesting fact about them, is that 90% of the founders of these startups are women, which is very interesting. So we look for startups, who are actually looking for local solutions through global technologies. And through startAD, we connect them to the global entrepreneurial scene, so through NYU and so on.
So what about, what would you say then, just briefly, because we're running out of time, what's the ideal business ecosystem for tomorrow's world?
So to me, the simple word here is legacy, okay? So for example, people always say, Silicon Valley is the answer. But Silicon Valley is like a big tanker steaming ahead. But we have changes happening right now, right here, right? So it's very difficult. The legacy can be a burden. For us, the apparent lack of legacy is our strength, right? So we can actually be more agile and connecting the corporates here with the startups and the investors and the institutions like NYU Abu Dhabi. I think startAD is an example. We can actually lead the way. To me, that's the landscape I'm looking at.